I greeted him and asked him what he needed. He started in by saying something that I certainly wasn't expecting. He told me that he had seen it. When I asked what he meant, he said that he had seen the figure that he had been seeing out of the corner of his eye, this time close up, and that he believed it to be the source of the wailing sound he had been hearing. I asked him what had happened, and he told me that he was sitting in his dorm room writing a paper for his American history class when he heard the wailing again. This time, however, it was the loudest he had ever heard it, and sounded like it was so close that it almost seemed as though it could have been in the same room as him. Then, he said, the wailing abruptly stopped, and was immediately followed by the sound of a faint knocking at his door. He slowly got up from his chair, walked over to the door, and looked out through the peephole. That's when he saw it. He described the entity as having a humanoid figure, with an overall emaciated appearance. I asked about any other notable features, to which he went on to describe that the creature, or whatever it was largely devoid of identifiable characteristics. He said that it had grayish skin with splotches of white here and there, with one arm being noticeably longer than the other, no body hair to speak of, and a nearly blank face. I asked what he meant when he said that it had a nearly blank face. His answer to my query sounded downright horrific. He explained that the face only had half of a mouth near the middle of its head, up by where one's nose would usually be, and a leaping gash on its forehead. I asked him to elaborate further, and he said that it looked as if it only had the right side of a mouth halfway up its face, and an oozing wound just a few inches above said mouth. I could hardly imagine such a thing. I asked him if he had any idea what it might have been, and in his somewhat flustered state, he said that he had no idea, but that when he looked out the peephole again, just a few short seconds after the first time he had seen the entity, it was gone. He then opened his door to examine the area, but couldn't find any evidence of anyone, or anything, having ever been there. He then went around the floor asking if anybody was going around in a costume and trying to scare people, or anything like that, but that no one had, or at least no one was fessing up to it. Feeling defeated, he went back to his room and didn't hear the wailing again that night. He later called campus police to report the incident, but was not taken seriously. The campus police believed that he was trying to prank them, so they instead issued him a stern warning about misusing the campus PD phone line and hung up on him. I asked him when this happened, to which he said it had all taken place just 2 days prior. I didn't really know what else to say, so I asked him if he in any way felt threatened or endangered by this thing. He said he didn't know how to feel, but that the creature certainly was menacing. Not long after that, the conversation came to an end, and we bid each other a good evening. Little did I know that would be the last time I would ever see Cy. Tuesday morning rolled around, and he wasn't in class. It was certainly out of character for him to miss class, but then Thursday came and went with no sign of him. Weeks would go by without so much as a word from him. Then in early May, finals week came, and he wasn't there for that either. I don't know if he dropped my course, dropped out entirely, or what happened to him. All I can say is that I hope he's doing well, wherever he is. As the end of the semester was drawing near, and students were preparing to move out and go home for the summer, I decided to go over to Ellicott Hall and see if I could hear anything for myself. So, one evening, after I had finished grading finals for the day, I headed up that way and just stood outside for a while, since professors weren't permitted inside the residence halls, trying to see if I could hear what it was that Cy had been hearing. Not gonna lie, I'm not sure how anybody could hear much of anything over the cacophony of techno music that I could clearly hear coming from the building while I was stood at least 50 feet away. After about a half an hour or so, and not having heard anything that sounded like wailing, I gave up and went home. That was this past spring. It is now the middle of the summer, and with no classes to teach, I got to work on the essay that my colleague and I were collaborating on when something strange happened. As I was sitting at my kitchen table, working on my laptop, I could have sworn that I heard the faint sound of wailing off in the distance.